Hi everyone, this is Pennsylvania attorney Evan Gutman here with the next video, video number 15 of my legal education video series. The videos are based upon my book titled State Bar Admissions and the Bootlegger's Son, which is about the good moral character standard in order to obtain a law license and be admitted to the state bar to practice law. The book in its entirety is available on both of my websites. I have two of them. One is titled heavensadmissions.com and the other is gutmanvaluations.com. In addition to my book, State Bar Admissions and the Bootlegger's Son, both websites also have a supplement to that book that I published a few years after the first book, as well as they also have a fictional novel I wrote titled Heaven's Admissions Process, which is a somewhat humorous, lighthearted novel that compares the criteria, fictional, for being admitted into heaven with the criteria on earth for obtaining a law license as regards the good moral character standard. So here we go with video 15. And there's a PDF similar to the other videos associated with that's included in my book. You should be able to obtain it on the website you're viewing this video, which I have it on Facebook, and then hopefully you can also access the PDF on YouTube. But I'm working on that a little bit, so you'll be able to see the video. I think I'll be able to get the PDFs on there too, though. We'll see. And they're also basically available on both my websites, the PDF. So this chapter, today's topic, is titled McCarthyism and State Bar Admissions. Because the State Bar Admissions process and the application of the good moral character standard is really closely related to what happened in this nation in the 1950s when McCarthyism became a quite powerful political movement for just a few years. And it was based upon Joe McCarthy. And I'm going to talk about McCarthyism and its relationship to the state bar admissions process. But let me tell you about Joe McCarthy. Joe McCarthy, based upon instilling a fear of communism, which was known as the Red Scare in the 1950s, realistically became a very powerful political figure for a short period of time. He was the most notorious instigator of the Red Scare. What is interesting because, first of all, Joe McCarthy, who was a U.S. Senator, before becoming a senator, he was a lawyer. And not only was he a lawyer, he also became a judge. He became a Wisconsin circuit judge, and in 1939, at age 30, he became a circuit judge at age 30, and he was the youngest man ever elected to be a circuit judge in Wisconsin. He was known to be extremely charismatic, had great leadership qualities, but was markedly lacking in true intellectual knowledge. He was known to be an admirer of Adolf Hitler, and he had Hitler's book Mein Kampf in his judicial chambers and would quite frequently point to the book to local attorneys, and he would note to them in reference to Adolf Hitler that that's the way to get things done. So, as a senator, he developed strong alliances initially with Senator Richard Nixon, as well as FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, and both Nixon and Hoover contributed also quite substantially to what was known as the Red Scare. What happened was McCarthy won public support by making accusations against other people that had a communicative appeal because of his charisma, but most often were lacking in actual factual support. He did become known as a Nazi sympathizer, and he detested communists, and as a result, any of his enemies he basically labeled a communist, or most of his enemies he labeled as a communist. On July 17th, 1950, the Tidings Committee of the U.S. Senate issued a scathing indictment of McCarthy's tactics. The U.S. Senate report, the Tidings report, characterized McCarthy's methods as a fraud and hoax perpetrated on the Senate of the United States and the American people. They represent perhaps the most nefarious campaign of half-truths and untruths in the history of the Republic. McCarthy, in turn, countered. He was known for his counterattacks. McCarthy, in February 1952, told an audience that the nation's leadership, the leadership of the United States, was, quote, almost completely morally degenerate, unquote. And by the way, the citations for these quotes are in my books, in the footnotes to the books. When Eisenhower, Dwight D. Eisenhower, who basically commanded the Allied forces, not basically, he did command the Allied forces during World War II. When Eisenhower was elected president, McCarthy's political position was initially enhanced quite a bit because Eisenhower was a quite conservative Republican with immense public support. And he basically adopted policies that fostered investigative techniques that McCarthy was totally in favor of, and those are the same type of investigative techniques that state bars quite often use in assessing the good moral character or lack of good moral character in non-attorney bar applicants. However, things kind of went downhill rather rapidly. Initially, McCarthy could do pretty much whatever he wanted because he had Eisenhower's support. But on July 24th, 1953, Dwight D. Eisenhower's brother, Arthur Eisenhower, he called McCarthy, quote, the most dangerous menace to America, unquote. McCarthy, in turn, in June 1953, known basically to not be bashful in any manner, McCarthy stated in June 1953 that anyone who invoked constitutional rights in refusing to tell a congressional committee about Communist Party membership is obviously a communist. So in other words, if you basically asserted constitutional rights, you were a communist, according to McCarthy. McCarthy then made a huge blunder. Arthur Eisenhower had come down with his statement criticizing McCarthy. But what McCarthy did is he then started attacking the legitimacy of the United States Army. And they were known as the Army hearings. And Eisenhower, having been a five-star general in World War II with an impeccable reputation and obviously a huge supporter of the military, once McCarthy attacked the military on the grounds that it was comprised of communist individuals, then Eisenhower, defending the military, came down real hard on McCarthy. And McCarthy was not a match for Eisenhower. He really was not. At that point in time, then, in 1954, Richard Nixon, also a staunch conservative like Eisenhower, Richard Nixon withdrew his support of McCarthy. So McCarthy's power base was basically diminishing when ultra-conservative politicians such as Nixon and Eisenhower withdrew their support of him. There were then televised hearings in the U.S. Senate where McCarthy testified, and on television, in front of the whole general public, he really embarrassed himself. He did a terrible job testifying, and with that, he was politically demolished after the Army hearings. McCarthy died in May 1957, just a few years after he had established the height of his power. In May 1957, he died of cirrhosis of the liver due to his alcoholism. McCarthyism, though, really was and still is to a large extent today the heart and soul of how the state bar admissions process works with respect to the assessment of a non-attorney applicant's moral character. What happens is the applicants are given this very voluminous application that makes numerous unconstitutional and overly personal inquiries, and then any mildly incriminating responses are then irrationally elevated by the bar examiners to support an unjustified inference that the applicant lied or tried to conceal information. The great philosopher Socrates, a long time ago, he proved that just by questioning an individual, you really can lead that individual to support any conclusion that you desire, regardless of what the true facts are. The U.S. Supreme Court, as I previously indicated, in the Königsberg case in 1957, referred to moral character as a dangerous instrument. In 1971, in the bar admissions case of In Re Stolar, which came down in February 1971, along with the companion case of Baird, as well as Law Student Civil Rights Council versus Wadman. In the Stolar case, which the applicant won, the majority opinion of the U.S. Supreme Court, written by U.S. Supreme Court Justice Hugo Black, the majority opinion of the U.S. Supreme Court in regards to the bar admissions process wrote as follows. This is a quote. "These cases, which concern inquisitions, are relics of a turbulent period known as the McCarthy era, which drew its name from Senator Joseph McCarthy from Wisconsin." McCarthy was repudiated. The bar admissions process today still pretty much remains the same based upon what Joe McCarthy supported. So I hope you found today's video interesting. Don't forget to read the PDF associated with it. It's titled McCarthyism and State Bar Admissions. And we'll see you in a day, 2 or 3 or 4, just a few days, hopefully. And remember, love right, don't fight. Bye.